Hello and welcome back to another Django tutorial. In today's tutorial we're going to talk about the settings.py file. I can imagine this is going to be a little lengthy, so we're going to jump right into it. Settings.py file is located in your MCO template directory. A settings.py file is the main settings for our Django project. Now we can have settings outside the Django project, but this is the main one. Alright. And we could import them into here. Anyhow, so this is our main settings file. This is the main configuration of our Django project. It's important to know that we don't need to use all these settings that come default when we run the Django -admin start project. We don't need them all, but we'll probably add a lot more. So we can add to it, we can remove from it. It's just the default settings. This is great for development, but as you'll see when we go to deployment, we're going to be adding settings to help our project work on a server that's in deployment. So let's get started. First things first, the Python comment up here. Like it says, this was generated when Django admin start project command was ran, and that's how we created our Django project. Alright, so the settings.py file was generated there. Then you see two links. The first one is basically an overview of settings of the settings.py file. I suggest you read that. Also, the second one is the full list of settings. This goes really in depth into the settings, kind of like what I'm going to do. If you ever have any questions about what you can do with the settings, read this one. It covers a lot. So I'm not going to beat that up too much. I do suggest that you guys read this if you're new to Django. So the next thing we see is import OS. What is OS? OS is a module that is comes from Python, and what it does is allows us to interact with the underlying operating system. So whatever Python's on top of, in my case it's the Mac operating system, it allows me to interact with that. In the Django project, the reason why they import OS is so we can find the path. What I'm talking about is the path down here. Alright, so we see base dir, and base dir is our base directory, which is root right here. Alright, so basically Django wants to know exactly where that base directory is located. So what it does is use OS module, and it goes OS path dir name, and the first one's actually going to take us to, if we were to set up base dir OS path dir name and then file inside that, it would actually take us to the MCO template. So then that's why we see it a second time, OS path dir name, and it takes us out one more to root. And then you see OS path, absolute path, and basically what absolute path is like normalizing the path. So it's the absolute path, I should say. So it's more readable. Basically, that's what it's doing, is normalizing it. All right. If you're ever curious to know what your base path is, or where your base dir is, or something like that, you can just do like print base dir, just like that. Save your file. Go and run your server. So Python 3 manage.py run server, just like that. And we're going to get a path up here. Users, Tom, desktop, Django, template, root. So that's my base dir right there. Alright. So that's pretty cool. So we can just find our root that way. And this is a normalized absolute path right there. Alright. So I'm going to go ahead and comment that out so you guys can keep that, but I'll comment it out. The next thing we come down to is the security key. Now, security key is very important. The security key is created when we run the Django admin start project command. The variable provides this variable here provides a cryptographic signing, which is basically what was I going to say? A digital signature, that's what I was looking for, which provides a level of security with data when it is sent through a non-secure channel, which normally the internet's going to be non-secure in most instances. So when we send data, we're sending a digital signature, which is a cryptographic signing, right? So when we send that, if the I can't even talk today. Digital signature matches up with our security key right here. Basically, it says this data is good, and it will allow the user to accept that data. That's what I'm trying to get at. So we use security key for that type of purpose, is to for digital signing and to show that our data that we're sending is safe. All right, that's it in a nutshell. A couple important things to note about this is, number one, don't share your security key with anybody. All right, like I am. Don't share that, because then people are able to manipulate the digital signature and send different data, and you don't want to do that. Also, it's required. So, is my server still running? Yes, my server's still running. Watch what happens here. If I do this and save and open back up, boom, I get security key setting must not be empty. Shuts down the server. Django will not run without a security key. All right, it's important to note that. Whoa, there we go. So basically, this security key is created when we run the start project command. It also should be unpredictable and unique. All right. There's ways to change this if you ever need to change it. Go over to Django and just search security key. And there's some good information on the appropriate way to change this. All right. Next thing we move on to is the debug. When this is set to true, we get a pretty cool detailed debug page. All right, we can actually take a look at that. Yeah, I did say this. Let's go ahead and run the server again. And once that runs, I will show you a default page, or detailed debug page. That's what I mean. So let me get my browser set here for a second. Alright, so this is not too detailed because there's not much information I can do on the site without changing some things to get it detailed. But this is a minimal detailed debug page where it basically says, using URL conf defined in MCO template.urls, Django tried to find URL patterns in this order. And what I did was just put AS at the end of my URL up here. And the current URL, AS, did not match any of these. So if you read the detailed debug page, you're like, it pretty much explains what you're doing wrong. All right. In most cases. Sometimes it doesn't explain it properly and you're just completely lost. But in most cases, it will give you a lot of information. And a lot of the information that it does give you is like trace back to the error. So we can trace back to the error, like, for example, here. Django tried to find URL patterns. Well, if AS is supposed to be one of our URL patterns, and it's just showing admin, well, somewhere along the line, then we are missing AS, all right? Also, like metadata information it provides us with, also provides us with some information from the settings.py file, but it will omit some of the settings.py file because of security reasons. Like API, if you have a variable in here that's like API underscore key, like that, it would omit it because a portion of it matches. So anything with API in it, or anything with key in it, or anything with pass in it, anything with secret, signature, or token, it will omit it. So just be aware of that, because if you go and start making settings on your own to work with some of your apps or something like that, you may run into an issue where you can't find a problem with your Django project because there's some omitted words from the detailed debug page. Okay, with that being said, whenever you go to deploy your site, do not deploy it with true. All right, and the reason is because it provides you with a detailed traceback. It provides you with metadata, and it provides you with some of the settings. A smart bad person would be able to look at some of that data that they get from the detailed debug page and be able to go in and hurt your website. So just be aware, if you're going to deploy your site, you want to make sure you set debug to false. All right. Next thing we see is allowed host. Allowed host is what domain name is hosting this site. All right. So this is to prevent header attacks where smart bad people, are able to go in and change the HTTP headers coming back from your site. So by setting a domain name in here, it prevents this site from being shown on different domain names, if you will. All right. So basically, we can set it like we could do. It's got to be in a string format, master code online, like that, and that would be shown as master code online. Or we could do www master code online, like that. So it would accept it with or without the www. Or we could do we'll just take that www away, take this away, and then that is called drawing a blank, wildcard. It's called a wildcard. So we could, this would represent no www or represent www.mastercodeonline. All right. Now, I've worked with some developers in some Django projects who like to do this. Oops, not like that, like this. All right. And what this does is says it allows all hosts. So it could be google.com, or it could be MrBadHacker.com, or it could be Mastercode Online. It could be anything. All right. And this is a big security problem, because then you really open yourself up to header attacks. So if you're having issues trying to figure out allowed host, because you may be working with a project that has a lot of subdomains or something like that, or some kind of issue down there, don't just throw this in. Go find the correct way to set it up, because you're really opening yourself up to an issue. All right, so don't do that. Even though you can do that, don't do that. There we go. All right, next thing we see is installed apps. We got some installed apps already in here for us. We got admin, authenticate, content type, sessions, messages, static files. We'll see a lot of these in action. I'm not going to explain what each one of them does at this moment, but we will also be adding a lot of apps to installed apps. And what install apps does is kind of like if you worked with WordPress or any of those other CMSs, when you install a plugin to their framework, you basically are telling them, hey, I installed something new. So in our case, say we did blog, all right, we saying, hey, we got a blog app, and hey, go look for that blog app. Well, that blog app is going to be located in our root on the same level as MCO template, so that's how it's going to find it. And if you don't add the blog in there, it's not going to function properly. It's not going to find that app, all right? So we have to add our apps in here. Sometimes when you grab like Django packages built by other developers, you have to add that in there as well. So that's where we add our applications. And remember, applications are little helpers that help our project blossom into something really nice. So apps are kind of like plugins, all right? All right, middleware. Middleware mainly deals with your request and response. We've talked about this before. The internet works on request and response. All right, the user sends a request to us via our server through our WSGI file, and it goes into our URLs. Well, a lot of this has to do with the request and response, and then we send our response back from our views. So this middleware stuff right here is what's handling that. Like you can see security middleware, there's sessions middleware, there's message middleware, there's a message framework built into Django that uses the message middleware. Basically, it's just a lightweight little programs that do things, all right? Normally, we don't mess with these. There might be a time that you might need to build your own, but, you know, Django and other developers have developed these middlewares to help us. Normally, you can go find one that will help you if you need one, all right? But normally, we don't touch them too much. We might in a more advanced tutorial. Anyhow, next one's a root URL conf. This one is important because this is how we set the URL path, or set the path to our urls.py file. Our urls.py file is located in MCO template, and this is our main URLs file. This is the hub, all right? So when we build other apps, we're going to go and build an URL, and then we're going to include other urls.py files to the other apps. And then when we get the other app, that's where we'll have a lot of our URL patterns set up. All right, so this is the main one, and then everything branches off there normally. Or we can just throw everything in this one. That works too. All right, back to settings.py file. So that's all you need to know. Root URL conf is just setting our path to our urls.py file. The next thing we see is templates. And the templates is a list containing a dictionary which provides all the settings for our Django template engines. All right. And the template engines allow us to do some pretty cool things with HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. Django has a template engine built into it where we can actually use some Python code in our HTML to make things happen. So we will look at this further, because if I continue to explain it, you're just going to get confused. We'll look at this further when we get to our template section of our tutorial series. But this is how we set this, the settings for that. All right. Next thing we see is our WSGI application, and this is just a path to our WSGI file, and that contains our application. All right, so we saw what the WSGI file does, and this is just a path to it. The next thing we see is databases, and this is about the most default database you can have, and that's SQLite 3, and basically what that is a lightweight database that we use in development. All right, it's not something you want to use in deployment. So here you got to have a default set. All right, so we have our default set. When we set up our database for deployment, which we're going to do in the next group of tutorials, because we're going to deploy this once we have our template set up, we'll have to set up a different database. That's what I'm trying to get at. So you'll see how we do that, but we're not going to dive into that now. Next thing we see is our authenticate password validators, and these are pretty cool little applications that are built to authenticate passwords. Right now, the way it's set up, it does not authenticate any password. So a user can use any password they want. They can use A if they wanted to. In here we can throw in settings like the maximum length of a password can be this, or a minimum length could be that. So we can do all our settings. We'll do that in a future tutorial, but that's where we do it. And these are just little validators that help us do that. All right. Next thing we see is language code. The language code for me is English, when I can barely speak it sometimes. English, US. If you go to, if you go all the way up here, you go here to 1.10 ref settings. There's a bunch of links to how to set up to the language codes, also to the time zone. So if you ever have a question or you want to change these, that's where you want to go. Or right here, I guess that would give it to you. So anyhow, language code, mine is English US. Time zones, UTC time. If you want to set a time zone, go for it. The next one is use underscore I18N, and that is set up to use Django's translation system. That's what it is. Yeah. If you want to use that, always just keep it set to true. And then the next one's use underscore L10N, and that's do you want Django to use specified numbers and dates for the location? That's set to true. So based off your locale, which is also set off your language code, I believe, if I remember correctly. Thinking about this for a second. Yeah. Well, no. Can be set off your language code. Falls back to your language code. I'm sorry. Middleware. If you have locale in your middleware, which we do not, we will be adding that. But it will use your numbers and dates based off that. And then use time zone. Do you want Django to use time zone? Yes or no? Sure. So I'm forgetting something here. Oh, time zone up here. What time do we want to set it to for the database? So if we do like date time, do we want to use UTC time? Do we want to use Eastern Standard Time? Do we want to use this? Do we want to use that? That's for the database, all right? And then use time zone. If set to true, it'll be made aware of time zone. Set to false, it's just going to ignore the time zone. That's what that does. All right, the last one is static URL, and basically all this does is when we go into our building our templates, we're gonna set the location of our static files, like our static files being CSS, JavaScript, and HTML. Well, not just CSS and JavaScript, I guess, but we need to set a path to that, right? Or a location for our CSS files. So in our case, say our website's mastercode online, ours would look like this, the way it's set now. Mastercode.online /static /. All right. And then after that it would be like something like CSS / bootstrap .min .css, something like that. All right, so that's how it would look, but we're setting the static URL. We want to say static. If we said awesome like this, then it would just change this to awesome. All right, and that'd be awesome CSS bootstrap .min .css. That's all it's doing. All right, so change that back to static before I forget and confuse the crap out of myself tomorrow morning. All right, there we go. So if you guys have any questions on this, we basically just scratched the surface. I could sit here for hours talking about settings.py file. There's so much that can happen here. So there's so much we can change. There's so much we can create. So much we can do, and I'm going to try to cover as much as that in our tutorial series. But if you have any questions about the default settings.py file, let me know. I'll try to answer those questions for you. Otherwise, see you in the next tutorial where I guess we will actually start setting up our template to deploy it. So if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next tutorial.